This is Tony Brewer from the We Talk Truth Group, and you're listening to Cogitations. Today's Cogitations is going to be about WWJD. What would Jesus do? Back whenever I was young in the mid 90s, there was a campaign that went around. Everybody wore bracelets, WWJD. Let me tell you something. That was awesome. And I think a lot of people underestimated the profundity of that simple question, what would Jesus do? And we're going to talk about that because it's such a difficult thing, and it's such a complex and abstract idea to act out what you believe somebody else would do. And it's something that it's kind of innate. We learn it as children when we play. And that's one of the tragedies about a child who is abused and isn't allowed to be a child, is because they forget, or they never learn rather, what play is. And you would think that, well, Tony, if you take a child and they have a bad life and stuff, that's terrible, but they would learn certain things. Well, no, they don't learn things. A child's job is to play. The most important things that a child can learn at school is on the playground. I think one of the problems we have in our society today is they cut recess from grade school. They need to put recess back in grade school, and they need to have more of it. I remember we had a 30-minute recess in the morning and a 30-minute recess in the afternoon. And maybe it was longer than that. I don't know. But you probably need an hour. You need an hour-long recess in the morning and an hour-long recess in the afternoon, because children learn through play. This is so important. In fact, my wife, this is neat. I'm kind of proud of this. My wife is a play therapist. Now, whenever she says children learn through play, she would say adults learn through play as well, and she means something just a little bit different than what I do here. She actually therapizes. She actually counsels and gives therapy and gives healing therapy to children through play. Somebody is here from the school system that I work in. We have recess in the morning and after lunch. That's good. It probably needs to be more of it. We focus so much on the book learning that we forget what children learn in play. So what does that have? Does that have anything to do with WWJD? Ooh, that coffee's hot, and it's good. So let me see, the school system. Oh yeah. Does children at play have anything to do with what would Jesus do? Well, yes, it does. So, cogitations. Hitherto is the end of the matters. For me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me, and I kept the matter in my heart. Or my countenance changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart. Well, we're not going to keep the matter in our hearts. We're going to talk about it. That's Daniel 7:28. So that's what cogitations is about. Now let's talk about children at play, or let's talk about what would Jesus do, and let's talk about the importance that Jesus places on children in the kingdom. And then we'll bring in this idea of the profundity of what would Jesus do. First off, notice Matthew chapter 18. At the same time came disciples unto Jesus, saying, Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus called a little child unto him, and set him in the midst of them, and said, Verily I say unto you, except you be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Whoso therefore shall humble himself as this little child, the same is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoso shall receive one such little child in my name receiveth me. But whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and that he were drowned in the deep part of the sea. Now that's subjunctive case verbs, and it's something that's not going to happen, but the idea is we can understand how terrible it would be if a millstone is hung about our neck and we're cast in the deep part of the sea. So we can extrapolate from that the offense that one would incur if they harmed a little one that believed in God. Folks, if you'll forgive me for being so colloquial, he ain't talking about kids here. He's talking about your Christian brethren. Okay? We're gonna tie this in. Actually, we're gonna go all the way to church discipline. Think about little children at play. Do you know what a group of little children will not do? They will not tolerate a bully. They will not tolerate someone who is not fair, someone who doesn't have a sense of fairness. I study Jordan B. Peterson a lot, and I love his writings, and I love his wisdom. I think he would make a very good Christian. He doesn't claim to be anything, because he has this idea that it would be the height of arrogance to actually claim to believe in God on a public stage and then be seen as not acting out that belief. And that's profound, and and a lot of Christians need to adopt that concept. But he lives as if he believes in God. That's what he says, and he does. But that's, as I said in a previous podcast, that'll only take you so far. That'll get you a good life here on this earth, but it won't do much for you in eternity. So let's talk about these children. Where was I at, man? Oh yeah, the Jordan Peterson, the rats. He talks about these experiments that he did, or that are done with these rats, and you can study about them. That if you take a rat that two rats, they play. Okay, just like children, puppies play, rats will play, children play. Usually, all child animals, all young animals play with one another, and they learn a lot through that play. Well, the rats play, and they play up into adulthood, and a rat that is 10% bigger will win in wrestling like 90% of the time. Like, it was interesting statistics. Of course, they studied all of this. And so anyway, the problem is, if the big rat, and it's an interesting hierarchy there, hierarchy of dominance. The two rats come together and they play, and then the one that defeats will come back and they'll ask permission to play. So they ask permission with body language and stuff like that, and then they'll play, and they'll engage in play wrestling and stuff. And if the dominant rat, the one that's 10% bigger, who can win 90% of the time, if the dominant rat does not allow the smaller rat to win at least 30% of the time engaging in play, then the smaller rat will stop asking the dominant rat to play. Now, isn't that interesting that intrinsic in a lower life form, such as a rat, that a sense of fairness is, a sense of balance and fairness is instilled? That's the way it is with children. From 2 to 4, from at 4 years of age, a hierarchy is developed in children, and a sense of fairness and a sense of group awareness is involved or instilled, and they know this, and they know this instinctively. And I'm loath to use the word instinctive. They don't really know it instinctively. It's developed. And if you have one child that doesn't have that sense of fairness, that always takes the other children's toys, that always acts like, in other words, if you have a child that acts like a brat, that child is ostracized in a group, and he's not accepted in the group because of the sense of fairness of the group, because he isn't a group player. And that is complex, and that is amazing, and it's difficult for adults to do, because adults, we have this sense of we want to be validated, and we want to validate people. And so if somebody comes into our group and they're mean to us, if they're mean to us out of one side of their mouth, but they validate us out of the other side of their mouth in some way, we will bear with them, and we will allow in our lives toxic people that tear us down. Children at a very young age do not do this. and this will go on all through and up until adolescence, and long about adolescence, you start learning about, you start seeking validation from outside. You start seeking validation from outside the group, and you will, Proverbs 27, verses 1 through 7 is a good study of the dangers of seeking validation from the wrong place. And so once a child starts exploring and becoming and seeking out who he is or she is, and starts to understand the world in a more broad and complex and abstract manner, they'll start seeking validation, and then they'll start letting people in. They will, the down the hierarchy, the sense of fairness will go, and they will start letting in their clique and their group, or into their lives, their own little microcosm of the universe, people who are very toxic. Okay. And that's so interesting to me because of this chapter right here and what Jesus talks about. Now, so fairness, that a very young child has a sense of fairness, and they will not let somebody who is a brat or a bully or someone who is hard to deal with into their group. They will ostracize them. And it is not personal. They're not malicious about it. But they're very good at only allowing people around them that treat them the way that they need to be treated, and that promote the value system of the little group that they're in. And believe you me, even a group of 4-year-olds, if you got 10 4-year-olds and there's one brat in the 4-year-old group, he's ostracized. They have a value system in that group. And that value system is the hierarchy of value. There is the hierarchy of importance. There is usually fairness. Can a child get along and share and be nice and be affectionate and all of these values that Christ promotes? It's all right there in a group of 10 4-year-olds. All right, very interesting stuff. So, what's it have to do with the profundity of WWJD? Look at very young children, 4, 5, 6-year-olds, when they play, when they engage in play. What about playing pretend? Have you ever seen your children play house, and usually the brother is the daddy and the girl is the mommy, and they have a kitchen set, and the boy, the girl has the kitchen set, and maybe the girl pretends like she's a, whatever. The boy usually is, he might be a cowboy, he might be a policeman, he might be a firefighter, he might be an astronaut, and the girl intrinsically desires to be a homemaker or something like that. And so they're playing. Basically, they're acting out what they see around them. So if they're in a 2-parent household and they're playing house, they are. The boy acts out the daddy's role, and the girl and the young girl acts out the mother's role. If you want to see how you are, you watch your children play house with one another. If you have young children, it's very interesting. Now, think about the profundity of that and the difficult nature it is. You see, what they're doing, they're not really acting like their parents, because that would mean that they are mimicking their parents' movements and stuff like that. What they are doing is they are perceiving the essence of who their parents are from their perspective. And they are taking what they know from their parents, their values, and they're extrapolating from what they know of their parents, how they would act in certain situations and scenarios. And then the children's playtime is to craft situations and scenarios, and then to pretend to be and act out the way they think their parents would act in those scenarios and situations. That's why it's a very sobering thought when a young girl starts griping, and she said, "I'm acting like mama," and she's griping and she's harpy and maybe putting her hand on her hip and talking mean to her brother. Okay, that's what you're doing. If that's what your daughter's doing, then that's what you're doing. And that's a mirror image of who you are. That's so very interesting. Now, children intuit this. They just know it. And they when I say intuit this, it's not that they're born with it. They intuit it from their surroundings. It's developmental. That's how they learn. And that's how they develop personalities of themselves. Children are amazing. I mean, they're really amazing to watch and to study. But they'll teach you so much. And God's got a soft spot in his heart for children, let me tell you. But anyway, so back to the profundity of WWJD. What would Jesus do? Well, just like a little child sees his parents or sees, well, take for instance, a young boy playing cowboys and Indians, or we used to play, I had two cousins, and me and my two cousins, we would play superheroes, and we would run through the woods and the hollers, and we would play superheroes, and we always were fighting against very long odds, but the reason we were fighting was extremely noble. It's not because we knew how Captain America, it's not that we were acting just like Captain America would act in the way we moved our bodies and the way we talked. We still talked about like three hillbillies from Northwest Tennessee. But we took the value system of the heroes. For instance, Superman, truth, justice, the American way. The Avengers, man, helping the weak. Psalm 37 is the Avengers mantra. The meek, the Avengers have a sword and a bow, and they use that sword and the bow to protect the righteous and to protect the righteous and the weak. Well, that was the Avengers, and you always did what was right. You could never tell a lie. So we could take that value system, and from that value system, we could apply those values across a large expanse of situation and scenarios and craft a manner of action. So no, we didn't contort our bodies or speak exactly like Superman or Captain America or, whoever we were pretending to be at the time. But we knew how they would act. We could extrapolate from their value system how they would act in a situation, so then we could act in that way and we could respond to that situation in that manner, okay? So, in other words, Superman, he's always going to do what's right. He's always going to save the girl. He's always going to, he's going to never tell a lie, and he's going to go to great lengths to make sure nobody's going to get killed. So from that value system that I've quickly articulated, you could make a plethora, as a child, you can make a plethora of different scenarios and act just like Superman would act and have your fun that way. And you're learning, by the way. You're learning what it means to always do the right thing. You're learning what it means to never tell a lie. You're learning what it means to do all of this. Now, that is amazing that children do that, because it's what we're supposed to do with Jesus. Think about Titus chapter 2, verse 11. For the grace of God that bringeth salvation teaches us that denying ungodliness and worldly lust, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present world, looking for that blessed hope and glorious appearing of the great God and our Savior, Jesus Christ. We're supposed to act like Jesus. But you've never seen Jesus. You don't even know what he looks like. How do we know how to act like Jesus? Well, does that mean that you can go to the temple and you can make a whip and you can drive out animals? Well, we're never going to be in that situation. But what can we do? We can look at the value system the system of values and the hierarchy of value that caused Jesus to braid that whip of cords and to overturn the money changers' tables and to drive those animals out of the temple. We can know what motivated Jesus to action there, and we can extrapolate from that a set of values that would motivate us to action in other scenarios that are totally different, in literally different rather from the temple, but the same in principle. That's a deep and complex abstract idea, and it's difficult to do. But we are called to do it. You see, we're to deny ungodliness and worldly lust, and we're to live soberly, righteously, and godly. What we do is it's the difference between command and precept and example. We have enough of Jesus's life and enough of the nature of God. That's why we have the Old Testament. That's why Paul wrote, "For whatsoever things were written aforetime are written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the Scriptures might have hope." Romans 15:4. We can know the mind of God because of the Bible, and we can take God's value system. And we've seen how Jesus acted on earth because Jesus was God in the flesh. We know how to act godly in every situation and scenario that we're in. We apply God's value system to that scenario and we act like God. And when I say act like God, I don't mean we make judgments and we rule. I mean we literally act the way God would act if he were in that situation. What would Jesus do? Is Jesus God? We act the way we think Jesus would act if he were in that situation. And we learned to do this when we were children, when we were 4 years old, developing a hierarchy of dominance and competence between 10 or 15 little rugrats running around the playground. We developed that understanding and ability to take what Jesus has done and the nature of God and extrapolate from that a code of conduct for every single situation that we will ever be in. Okay? That is amazing. We should hit our knees and thank God for the example that we have in Christ and for the ability that he has given us to discern what Jesus would do and what God would do in every situation that we could ever be in. Okay? It's I am not meet for the task of articulating the profundity of the ability and the statement, what would Jesus do? Literally, in everything that you're doing in the world, in your life, you ask the question, what would Jesus do? And then you take what you know about Jesus and you formulate a course of action. And because you can know Jesus, because we have more than a list of commandments and precepts, because we have his example, we can take what Jesus would do. We could take his values and his hierarchy of values, and we can take that and extrapolate it and formulate a course of action for literally any scenario that we would ever be a part of on this earth. It is the most amazing thing that I could ever think of. It's the most powerful tool that God has given us, is to be able to act like Jesus. I read this one time. This is not original with me. If all we had were commandment and precept, what we would have is a commandment to go climb the mountain. But since we have an example, we have someone whispering in our ear, go up this side, go this way, put your hand here, avoid that rocky crag over there, go around this side of this boulder. You can do this because I have done this. That's the difference between example and commandment. If all I have is a list of commandments, I have nothing to help me in the different scenarios and situations in which I would find myself. I have no ability to act like Jesus if all I have have is a list of commandments. I have the actions of Jesus on this earth, and I have the mind of God and how God dealt with people in the Old Testament. So I can look at the mind of God in the Old Testament. I can look at the actions of God in the New Testament, and from the mind and from the actions, I can see the persona or the essence, and I can see how Jesus would act in every situation that I will ever conceivably be in my life. I don't know, y'all. That's mind blowing. That's amazing. I haven't got any comments in the added page. Y'all are either enthralled or you think I'm crazy. I'm going to go over here to the We Talk Truth group and see if I've got any comments there. The profundity of the WWJD campaign. I'm thinking about bringing it back. I'm thinking about getting me a leather band with WWJD on it, because I want to. It's that big a deal. I think we ought to bring it back. Oh man, my poor little old computer. It needs a bigger engine. Anyway, I don't see any. It's not. Come on, computer. We'll refresh it again to see if it'll work. But I cannot believe that I used to disparage people wearing all those bracelets. WWJD. Well, it's amazing. I got one comment in the We Talk Truth group, and I appreciate the sentiment. It says, "You're not crazy." That's good. That's good. So, well, listen, I want to go back to the added page, and then we'll spend about just a few minutes wrapping this up, because I want to tie what I just talked about. I want to tie it into church discipline in Matthew chapter 18. I think if we talk about children and we talk about God's how God the value that God places on children, let's see how this all works together. Remember what I said about a group of 4-year-olds. They will absolutely not tolerate unfairness. They will not tolerate anybody sinning against the group. Listen to this. So verse 6 is, "But whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and that he were cast in the deep part of the sea," or drowned in the depth of the sea, rather. Now, verse 7, "Woe unto the world because of offenses, for it must needs be that offenses come, but woe to the man by whom the offense cometh." Now, there's going to be a man that brings offenses, and wherefore, now here's what to do with them. "Wherefore, if thy hand or thy foot offend thee, cut them off and cast them from thee. It is better for thee to enter into life halt or maimed, rather than having 2 hands or 2 feet to be cast in everlasting fire. And if thine eye offend thee, pluck it out and cast it from thee. It is better for thee to enter into life with 1 eye, rather than having 2 eyes to be cast into hellfire. Take heed that ye despise not one of these little ones. For I say unto you that in heaven their angels do always behold the face of my Father which is in heaven. For the Son of Man is come to save that which was lost. How think ye, if a man have 100 sheep, and one of them be gone astray, doth he not leave the 99 and goeth to the mountains to find that which is gone astray? And if it so be that he find it, verily I say unto thee," let's see. "And if so be he that find it, verily I say unto you, he rejoiceth at the sheep that hath 90 of the 99, than the 99 which went not astray." I've got 2 or 3 things going on here at once. Pardon me. So verse 14, "Even so, it is not the will of your Father which is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish." So the idea Jesus is saying, there's going to be somebody sin in your group. You're going to have to cut them off, cast them into the fire, be done with them. Now, it's not the Lord's will that they should perish. So whenever they sin, don't just cast them off and put them into the fire, but rather, so in other words, he's offering some maturity here. Don't be like the 4-year-olds. The 4-year-olds, if somebody sins against the group, man, they're done. There's no sense of there's no waiting period. There's no nothing. Whenever a 4-year-old and a group of 4-year-olds sins against the group, that kid is ostracized, and he's got to work hard to get back in the good graces of the group. But God says it's not the will of the Father that should happen. Moreover, if thy brother shall trespass against thee. Now, he's not talking to a group of 4-year-olds. He's talking to a group of adults. If thy brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. If he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother. But if he will not hear thee, then take with thee 2 or more, and that at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word shall be established. And if he shall neglect to hear them, tell it unto the church. But if he neglect to hear the church, let him be unto thee as a heathen man and a publican. So again, this group of 4-year-olds, they're going to cut him off immediately, and they're not going to think anything of it. Well, because they're 4-year-olds. But we're adults, and God says, here's how you handle that. Okay? So the profundity of Jesus is amazing. What would Jesus do if somebody sins against the group, against one person in the group? Well, he would go to that person and he would say, you need to repent of that sin. And that's not a sin against God, by the way. That's a sin against the brother. And it doesn't have to be a sin against God, is what I'm saying. I can sin against my brother and not necessarily sin against God. So he would go to that person, but then, in other words, if you've got a guy in the group that's sinning against the group and he's just being unfair, he's being a bully, he's not sharing, he's not upholding the value system of the group. That's the idea. You go to that person, then a group of people goes, then you as a group, you say, you're no longer part of us. And where 2 or more are gathered together for this and by the authority of Jesus, Jesus is going to be with them. All right? It takes 2 people. In other words, if you've got a group of 3, 2 people can practice church discipline. If you've got a group of 100, you gather together to practice church discipline. I didn't mean to make this podcast about church discipline, but I think we would be remiss if we didn't bring it up, because do you understand that part of being like little children is practicing church discipline? Little children don't play with that. They do not play. Well, listen, I hope that you've enjoyed these thoughts. This idea about what would Jesus do is so profound. I'm really intrigued by exploring this more. And if you've ever thought about this, if you haven't ever thought about this, maybe put it in the comments. Maybe tell me, like, Tony, I've never thought about it the way you thought about it today. I've never heard it exactly like that. We need more teaching like this. We need more teaching that can delve into the complex nature of the Word of God, and put things out like this. We really need it. It's so interesting. It's so interesting. So maybe you want to bring back your bracelet, WWJD, and maybe you want to look at what Jesus did. Look at the value system that drove Jesus to the actions that he took, and extrapolate from that a course of action for literally every situation in your life. Because that's what the grace of God personified is Jesus. What the grace of God teaches you through commandment and precept, but also through his example of action, through divine example and his example of action is it teaches you how to act. How to leave all the things you're not supposed to do and how to live in a way that pleases God. Listen, if you like what we do, www.patreon.com/near churches. You can tweet questions and suggestions for show topics at Cogitations, or tweet me at nearchurches.com, Cogitations at nearchurches.com. And you can also follow us on Instagram at nearchurches.com. So God bless you, and I'm going to have this uploaded in a little bit at www.cogitations.podbean.com, and you can also find it on Apple Podcasts. Sorry, I lost my mind there for a minute. God bless you, and we'll catch you on the flip side.